Okay, so next up we're going to talk about this specific contract which coordinates the supply chain, which is called as the buyback contract. So as we looked at in the last video, that the main objectives of a supply chain contract is to achieve the optimal performance of the supply chain, which means achieve maximum profit within a supply chain. Total maximum profit of supply chain. And then the second one is that each party on the supply chain earns a higher profit. Okay, so those are the two objectives. So this buyback contract also needs to make sure that these two objectives are met. All right. So it has to ensure that the optimal performance of the supply chain is achieved, which means that overall the supply chain makes the highest profit that it can make. And secondly, that each party on the supply chain, which means the retailer or UV and the manufacturer or Zimaria, makes a higher profit than they were making without this contract. All right. So what the idea behind this buyback contract is quite simple. So what we have looked at so far is that we have the retailer, the manufacturer, the retailer sends to the customer, and then whatever is unsold at the end of the selling period, the retailer salvages. Okay, so the retailer is the one which salvages. But what this contract, buyback contract, does is it says that the manufacturer actually puts a contract in place which ensures that anything that is unsold, okay, all the unsold inventory up to a specified amount will be bought back by the manufacturer at an agreed upon price. Okay, so if Q was 234 here, okay, and let's say it was its unsold inventory is equal to 42, then these 42, okay, will be bought back by the manufacturer, or if not the entire 42, then maybe up to a specified amount will be bought back at a price which has already been agreed upon. Okay, so that's essentially what the buyback contract is. It says that the manufacturer will purchase the unsold inventory back from the retailer. So what does this do? See, as you can imagine, that if the retailer feels that its salvage value has increased. So let's take some simple example that here this, let's say it was 75, right? So its wholesale price was 75, so essentially the cost for the retailer is 75. It was selling it at 115, and then it was salvaging it at let me look it up, at $25. Okay, it was salvaging it at $25. So essentially, it's losing, the retailer is losing about $50 on each unsold one, on each unsold sunglass. However, because of this, the retailer decides that, hey, it's not really a good idea for me to order a lot of these sunglasses. So what I'm going to do is actually err on the side of caution and not have as many of these sunglasses on hand. So I'm not going to order as much. Okay, so here my cost of underage was 40, my cost of overage was 50. Okay, but now the manufacturer realizes this. The manufacturer realizes that actually the retailer is only ordering Q is equal to 234 in this case, and not higher, is because it doesn't make sense for the retailer to have a lot of quantity on hand. Okay, because it loses $50 on each single one sunglass that is left over at the end of the selling period. So it says that, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to put this contract in place because, hey, we would really like to make that maximum profit of 17,830 together. Okay, or at least get as close to it as possible. Okay, if not the entire amount, then we'll see how close can we get, but at least we'll make something more than that 14,940 that we're making. All right, so the retailer says that, okay, anything that's unsold, I'm going to buy it back. Okay, so that's what the buyback contract really does. Now, as soon as the salvage value increases from 25 to, let's say, 50, okay, if salvage goes from 25 to 50, then what happens? Then what would happen is that the retailer was losing $50 earlier and now it's only going to lose $25. So it will intuitively start ordering more. Okay, so it increases the optimal order quantity for the retailer. And if that happens, then the product availability would also be higher, okay, for the consumers, and it would mean higher profits for both the retailer and the supplier. So the kind of products for which this works very well are products with low variable cost, such as music, software, books, or magazines and newspapers. Okay, but what is the downside of this contract? The problem is that this unsold inventory now has to travel back to the manufacturer. Okay, so first the manufacturer made those sunglasses, shipped it to the retailer, then some of those sunglasses got sold to the end customer, some were left behind. The ones that were left behind now need to travel back to the manufacturer. So there is an additional shipping cost which comes into picture. Okay, extra shipping cost and surplus inventory for the supplier. And in the first case, the manufacturer or the supplier did not have any excess inventory. Okay, it got that order of 234, it manufactured those 234 and it was done. Its business was finished. But now it also has to do something with all the items that they get back from the retailer because they were not sold. So this increases the overall supply chain costs. All right. So essentially, what the buyback contract is that the manufacturer or the supplier mentions or puts a contract in place wherein they will be purchasing the unsold inventory from the retailer up to a specified amount at an agreed upon price. Okay, so this is a fairly common contract. One of the things that you guys mentioned in your feedbacks forms was we love the examples that are given class and you would like to have more. So I added some more of this. So this company called, so it's very common in retail stores. So Macy's is one of those retail stores which sends the unsold inventory back to the manufacturer. So Aris Isotoner in this case is the manufacturer, and I don't know if you've heard of this name, but they make winter gloves and caps and those kind of winter related apparels. So this apparel company actually, or this manufacturer, sells their products to the retailer, which is Macy's. Macy's would go about its business selling the products. Then maybe the winter is gone and they're still left behind with some of those winter gloves and caps and hats. Then in this case, Aris Isotoner would be purchasing all of those unsold inventory back and then deciding how to salvage it. So Macy's doesn't have to put those products on clearance or salvage it, but instead Aris Isotoner would be doing it. And they would purchase the unsold products up to a specified amount. Like maybe they would say, all right, I'm only going to buy 100 of those or 200 of those. And then, you paid me $20 as the wholesale price. I'm probably going to pay you back maybe $15 or $18. So essentially what is happening in this case is that the manufacturer is sharing some of those risks with the retailer. It's saying that, all right, I understand that, it's not possible for you to sell all the products that you have on your shelf. So you don't have to bear the entire risk of being left behind with unsold inventory. I'm going to share that risk, and by sharing the risk, I'm going to lower the risk that you as a retailer has. So that's one of the examples. Then Barnes and Noble, which is not very common these days, but this is a retailer which used to have very beautiful bookstores with like a coffee shop attached to it, and I think we used to have one in Gainesville a while ago, but anyway, I haven't been in one for a long time. So then this publisher, 10 Speed Press, actually accepts returns from the retailer Barnes and Noble. So they sell their books to Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble has it on their shelf. People come, people purchase, then maybe they say that it's been like 6 months, the selling period is kind of gone. So all the ones which are unsold gets sent back to 10 Speed Press. And then we also have examples in recorded music wherein this is kind of a little bit of an older example where the publisher would make CDs and then send it over to the entertainment house, and if anything is unsold, well, they just ship it back. But in case of virtual products or digital products, there's nothing to be sold back or sent back in that sense. However, there are contracts even with digital products which just make sure that no further licenses of that product can be sold. Okay, and then software also has examples of this kind of buyback contracts. So they're fairly common in the industry, specifically for these low variable cost kind of products. All right, so let's take an example of buyback contract. So here we have currently a retailer purchases sunglasses from the manufacturer at a price of $75 each and sells them at $115. So we have the retailer just selling to the end customer, and there is the manufacturer. So we have V is equal to 75. So we are going with the same example that we were talking about before. Manufacturer's production and shipping cost is $35. So this production and shipping cost includes producing the sunglasses and then shipping it to the retailer. Okay, manufacturer is saying that it will buy back any unsold inventory, but UE must ship leftover inventory back to Zematia. So they're saying, well, okay, well, whatever is unsold, I'm going to buy it back and I'm going to salvage it myself. So the manufacturer is going to salvage the product now. But the retailer has to ship it back. Okay. So everything that is unsold needs to be shipped back. And it cost them $1.5. And then their salvage becomes $25. So earlier the salvaging was happening at the retailer's end, but now it has been moved to the manufacturer, right? Because they're buying back all the unsold inventory. So the question becomes, how do we really set the buyback price? And the price that we want to set in this case is the optimal buyback price. All right, the optimal buyback price. And what do we mean by the optimal buyback price? It is the price which ensures that the expected profit of total supply chain is maximum. Okay, and we'll take a look at that in a little while. But first we need to find out, how do we really set up this buyback price? All right, so for that we have a formula. We are not going to go into the details of how we got this formula, although the derivation is available in the book, and I'll be happy to point you to it if you would like. But for the purpose of this class, we are only going to look at how do we use this formula in order to find the buyback price. So the components of the formula are the return shipping cost, the retail price, the wholesale price, the manufacturer salvage value, and production cost. Okay. So how do we find this optimal buyback price? So let's start plugging in the values. So what is the return shipping cost in this question? So in this question, we have the return shipping cost of $1.5, and then our retail price is $115. Then we would subtract 115. We'll subtract the wholesale price, which is $35 from the retail price, and then we'll multiply it with the retail price, and then manufacturer salvage value, right? Because earlier the retailer was salvaging it, but now the manufacturer is salvaging it, so we get $25 here. Then the retail price comes out to be again 115, and then the production cost is 35. So if we solve this, we should get $71.5. All right. So go ahead and solve it and see if you get this value or not. So what is special about this value, 71.5? So as I mentioned before, that this is the optimal buyback price. And what we mean by optimal is that it's that price which, when the manufacturer pays to the retailer for the unsold inventory, then the overall supply chain profit is maximized. Okay, so this is manufacturer pays retailer for unsold inventory when the overall supply chain profit is maximized and the profits for manufacturer and retailer are equal. Okay, so that's what's special about the optimal buyback price. So let's go to the next slide and take a look at this. So essentially, we have the wholesale price of 75 and then we have the buyback price of 71.5. All right, so this is where it is. So in this case, we see that, okay, well, the profit is maximized, yes, and the profit is actually split equally between the two. All right, now what this table is showing is that two things. One is, in all of these cases, the overall supply chain profit is the maximum supply chain profit. However, the split of profit is different between Umbra and Zemaria, or between the retailer and the manufacturer. Okay, so they're showing that actually there could be many different wholesale prices and buyback prices. The wholesale prices could be 35, 45, 55, so on. And then the buyback prices could be different values. But in all of these cases, we could potentially have the same overall supply chain profit, but the split of the profit varies. And when we get to the optimal buyback price, which is 71.5 in this case, then the profit is still the maximum. The overall supply chain profit is still the maximum, which is 17,830. And on top of that, the profits are equally shared. Okay, so clearly we see that the two objectives of the buyback contract are met here. First is optimal supply chain performance, right? And then the second one was every party is better than they were before. Okay, manufacturer and retailer better than before. So when this happens, we say that the supply chain is coordinated. Okay, let me take that away. So we say that the supply chain is coordinated. And the split of the profits is equal. So essentially we can adjust the wholesale price and buyback price in such a way at the same time so that we split the coordinated supply chain profit. And then it's also possible that we could keep the wholesale price the same and then just see what happens when the buyback price changes. So this table just shows us that as the buyback price increases from 55 to 65 to 75, what is happening? So what is happening is that the retailer is now the retailer's salvage price goes up, because what is the buyback price? The buyback is retailer's salvage value, right? So anything that is unsold, the retailer makes either $55, $65, or $75 on it. So we can see that as the salvage value goes up, the retailer is going to lose lesser and lesser amount of money on each unsold unit, right? In this case, in the first case, they lose $20. They lose $20, and then they also have to pay that $1.50 in the return shipping. So essentially, their overage cost becomes 21.5. But then when you increase this buyback price to $65, now they only lose $11.5 on each unsold unit. And then you make the buyback price equal to the wholesale price, then they only lose that shipping cost, right? They get all the quantity, they get all the money back except the 150 that they have to pay for shipping. So as this is happening, we can also note that Q will increase, right? And why would Q increase? Because now the risk that the retailer has to bear is getting lower, because it doesn't have to it doesn't lose a lot of money if the quantities are unsold, because its salvage is reducing, right? The G is reducing as we are going from 55 to 75. So clearly the retailer is going to be better off, okay? They're making a higher profit. But it's not always clear what's going to happen to Zemaria's profit, because it has to consider what to do with the unsold inventory. It has to salvage that amount. It might be able to make a higher profit, it might not be able to make a higher profit. So we are not very sure about Zemaria's profit, although in this case it seems like their profit is reducing. But if we take many other different examples, then we'll see that actually Zemaria's profit could be either higher or lower. But the overall supply chain profit also, we can see that it's not following a trend. It increased here and then it decreased here. So we cannot say anything about the overall supply chain profit. We cannot say anything about the Zemaria's profit or the manufacturer profits. But as the buyback price increases, the risk that the retailer has to bear for the unsold units reduces, because its salvage value is going up, right? So buyback price is also retailers' salvage. Okay, but when we are calculating the overage, then we also add the return shipping cost. All right, so what do we find here? We find that actually there are many different wholesale price and buyback prices pairs that can maximize the overall supply chain profit. So just take a look at slide 65 for an example. And then virtually any location of the supply chain profit between the two firms is feasible. So what is happening is that there is this zero-sum game going on between the retailer and the manufacturer, which means that as the manufacturer increases its profit, the retailer's profit goes down, and as the retailer increases its profit, the manufacturer's profit goes down. So they're just trying to see where do we balance this, and a lot of this depends upon how big the manufacturer is or how big the retailer is. Okay, whoever is the bigger party is gonna make sure that they get the higher chunk of the profit, right? If the retailer is like Walmart, which is huge, and the manufacturer is something like Tide, which may not be as big as Walmart is, then of course Walmart would make sure that they make more money than Tide does. So it depends on the bargaining power of the manufacturer and the retailer. Okay, so to summarize it all, buyback incentives can coordinate the supply chain. By coordinating, we mean that they make higher profits, and they make higher profits than an uncoordinated supply chain does. And they also are better off, like each party in the supply chain is better off than they were before. And then setting the buyback price is quite important since it determines how profits are allocated within the chain. And then the third one is it is possible to determine the buyback prices to optimize the total supply chain profits. So here is how we find the optimal buyback price, okay? And we use that formula to find the optimal buyback price, which is given on slide 63. All right. Okay, so let's take a look at a practice problem to make sure that we got this. So the problem says that Eddie's bookstore currently buys books from a wholesaler using a simple wholesale price contract. Following the shift in industry practices, the wholesaler starts offering the bookstores an option to return books at a partial refund, so 70% of the wholesale price, which is higher than the retailer's current salvage value. So while keeping the wholesale price the same, suppose that the shipping costs are negligible, what effect will this new contract have? Will the bookstore's order quantity increase? Will the bookstore's profit increase? And will the wholesaler's profit increase? So in this case, the key is that this bookstore gets it from a wholesaler. Okay, so the bookstore is like the retailer, and then sells it to the end customer. So now the salvage value that the bookseller gets is getting higher, and the wholesale price remains the same. So if the salvage value increases, so instead of losing $20, maybe now the retailer is only losing $10. So in this case, what will happen? Of course, they will start increasing the order quantity, and they will also make a higher profit. Because when the buyback price is 75, no, because as the salvage value increases, the overage cost reduces. So the order quantity by the bookstore will increase. And the bookstore's profit is also going to increase since it now gets additional money for returning the books, right? So earlier it was making just $10. So earlier salvage was, let's say earlier G is equal to 10 and then new G is equal to 20. So since it's gonna make a higher profit in returning those books, and let's keep the wholesale at maybe 50. Okay, so here they were losing $40 on each one. Now they're only losing $30. So of course, their profit is also going to increase. But the wholesaler's profit, on the other hand, it could increase or it could decrease. The reason why it could decrease is because now the wholesaler has to salvage all of those unsold inventory. So we don't know how much it would have to salvage. And its profit could increase because the bookstore is ordering a higher quantity now. Okay, so let's go to the next one. In this question, it says that a supplier sells a seasonal product with uncertain demand to a retailer. Consider two scenarios, two contracts. With the wholesale price contract, the supplier sells to a retailer with a wholesale price of $45. The supplier does not accept returns, and as a result, the retailer salvages leftover inventory at the end of the season for $30. So the wholesale price is $45, the salvage is $30. With the buyback contract, the supplier sells um, to the retailer with a wholesale price of $45, so that still remains the same. But the supplier buys back unsold inventory from the retailer for $38 at the end of the season, and the supplier's salvage value of return inventory is $30. So the salvage for the retailer becomes 38. So it was $30 before, now it goes up to 38, and now the wholesaler is the one which is salvaging it for $30, and the retailer also pays 50 cents per unit to ship the product back. So which of the following is true? So the first thing that we can see is that the retailer's salvage value is going up. It's going up to 38 from $30. So since now it can make a higher, now the loss that it has on each of the unsold unit reduces, it's better off, right? It's clearly better off with the buyback contract. But what happens to the supplier? Okay, is the supplier worse off? Is it better off? Or it could be worse or better. And similar to the previous question, the answer would be the supplier could be better off or worse off, because it's going to be better off because the retailer now orders more from the wholesaler. So it could be better off, but it could be worse off also because it doesn't know how much of those unsold inventory it will have to buy. So the wholesaler is the one who is accepting this risk of returned books. So that's why we cannot say that the supplier or the wholesaler is going to be better off or worse off. So the answer that we will choose for this is part E. All right. So then next up is I have put another numerical problem. So one of the other feedbacks that you guys mentioned in your forms was you would like to have more practice problems on the slides, which you can refer back to, which you can attempt on your own, and So essentially that you would really like an additional practice problem. So that's what I did. So here's a numerical practice problem. It is very similar to the Zematia and UV example that we just looked at, but here the numbers are different. So it's a good way for you to practice it. So here there are also 3 scenarios, or maybe 4. I'm just going to quickly lay out what the different scenarios are, and then you're welcome to practice it on your own. If you have any problems, we can talk in class on Monday or Wednesday. All right, so the first one is that we have a similar thing. We have a supplier and then we have a retailer which sells to the end customer. Then here C is equal to 1 and V is equal to 2. So the input becomes $2 for it, and then its selling price is 3, and then its salvage is 0.5. Okay, and then there is no goodwill loss in this question, it just remains at 0. And then the demand is normal with the mean of 500 and sigma of 75. All right, so that's what the problem looks like. So the first part of the problem is, what is Q star? How much does the retailer order? All right, then we will get this value. Then next up we can see how much profit is the supplier going to make, and how much profit is the retailer going to make. So we add those two up, we get the total supply chain profit. Then this is scenario 2, and this belongs to the integrated supply chain, wherein the manufacturer and the retailer become one single one single unit, and they sell directly to the end customer. So here the cost remains at 1. The selling price becomes 3. So this is V equal to C case. Okay. And then you can find the Q star, the manufacturer's profit, and the total supply chain profit. And this profit turns out to be the maximum total supply chain profit. Okay, because when the supply chain is integrated, or when V is equal to C, then in that case the supply chain does the best that it can ever do, or it makes the highest profit. So then the next example, then this is scenario 3, which talks about if instead the manufacturer buys back. So in this case, what's happening is that we again have the manufacturer, the retailer, and the end customer. And we have all of these values, like its cost is equal to 1, its wholesale price is equal to 2, and its price is equal to 3, and then it is going to buy back. Okay, so that becomes its salvage. Buyback is equal to 1.25, and then it also becomes the salvage for the retailer, and then the manufacturer salvages it for $0.5. Okay, the mean and standard deviation remain the same. So with these input, how do we find the Q star for the retailer? Okay. So what we would do is we would again find the underage and the overage. So the underage in this case would be price minus cost, which would be 3 minus 2, and then the overage would be the cost minus the salvage. So that in this case would turn out to be 2 minus 1.25. All right. So with these values, you can find your Q star. And once we know the Q star, we can also find out the expected profit for the retailer. And we can find the expected profit for the manufacturer, and we can find the overall total supply chain. All right. And then you can compare those two. When V is greater than C, then the overall supply chain profit is $908. When there is a buyback in place, the overall supply chain profit becomes $933. And then you can see that since Q star is greater when buybacks are implemented, this scenario serves customers better. And then you can also see that both the supply chain parties are better off because they're making a larger profit. And then this is scenario 4, where the manufacturer wants to set a buyback price in such a way that they want to focus on the total profit or maximize total profit. Okay. So once we want to set a buyback price to maximize the total profit, then we are going to use that formula that we did back on slide 63. Okay, which is basically this. So once you input all the values in it, you should get a buyback price of $1.75. And then what this $1.75 does is it ensures that the profits are equally split between the retailer and the supplier, and the overall supply chain profit is the maximum. Okay, and you will see that this 947 is actually equal to this, the total supply chain profit when the manufacturer was selling directly to the customers or when the supply chain was integrated. All right, so you can see that. Then next up, so that completes our buyback contract. Okay, so what did we do? We did we looked at 4 different kinds of problems, and you can take a look at those 4 different kinds of problems, and then I also gave you a complete problem to work with on your own for you to practice and check the values that you're getting. Now you might get some of the values a little bit here and there, maybe just a few points up or down, but that's okay, don't worry about it. The idea here is that you get the overall idea of what we are trying to solve. All right, but if you do have any problems in this, please let me know. Then next up we have some other supply chain contracts, and this we will just we will look at 3 more kinds of supply chain contracts. We will look at revenue sharing, and then we'll do a practice problem. We'll also look at vendor managed inventory and quantity discounts. So there are 3 more different kinds of supply chain contracts that we still need to look at, but those are going to be more conceptual in nature. So we'll take a look at it next time. So just to summarize what we did today, in this video we looked at the buyback contracts and what they do. Okay, so they coordinate a supply chain, and setting an optimal buyback price is very important because it determines how the overall profit is allocated. And once we set the optimal buyback price, we can maximize the total supply chain profits. And then we looked at 4 different variations to the problem related to buyback pricing and 2 examples for it. Okay, so I think that's plenty of practice for you to understand how buyback contracts work. Um, so I will be posting the homework which would be related to these buyback contracts. So I hope you guys understood everything that was covered here. If there are any questions, please don't hesitate to email me or ask me in class when we meet on Monday. Um, all right. So have a good one, everyone. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the rest of your holidays. If you have any questions about what we just covered or about the case studies or about anything else, I'm always available to answer them. Um, so just let me know. All right. So take care then. Bye bye.